Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part 2, joining me today is...
Are we actually recording?
Yes.
Okay, alright, cool, then it's me, Steve.
Listen man, I've been doing this show for fucking over 10 years. I'm allowed to fuck up.
No, you're not. You're a father. You are expressly not allowed to fuck up.
No, man, I don't know what fucking books you've been reading. Fathers fuck up all the time. Like, fathers almost exclusively have like a fucking brand on fucking up.
I mean, I guess if fathers didn't fuck up, we wouldn't have porn, so...
Oh, oof, rough. Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, so today we're discussing just a general topic that's kind of been on my mind. Just had enough stuff in life kind of like, you know, ticking up and being related to this lately that I'm like, yeah, this would be interesting to talk about. So I want to discuss the archetype of the trickster villain, not the villain, the trickster from The Flash, which is like kind of that like magic, all-powerful level trickster character that the hero has to outwit because they can never overpower them. And you see this a lot throughout just storytelling history. You've got your like Djinns, you've got your Rumpelstiltskins, you've got there's different like instances of it in Greek myth with like the trickster character. I guess it's not necessarily the villain, but like Odysseus kind of meets the mark for the trickster a number of times throughout his story. And then you see it all the way up into modern media. You have, you know, Superman and Mr. Mxyzptlk and Batman and Batmite. And it's just such a weirdly common trope. The thing that kind of really put it on my radar again was I was watching the fourth Shrek movie with Leah. Yeah, I know, right? But like it's just that thing that like, okay, it's Shrek versus Rumpelstiltskin is the whole idea of that one, and that's what Rumpelstiltskin is. You know, he's like the tricky little imp that you know cons you into stuff. I don't know. It's just it is a storytelling trope that I find interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too because the trickster is not like exclusively an antagonistic archetype. Like they are antagonistic to someone, but like they're not always the bad guy in classical myths. Like you've got on one end of the spectrum, you've got people, you've got like characters like the Coyote, or like you've got with Batman and Batmite, who Batmite's always just trying to fuck up Batman's life because he's his biggest fan. But like on the other side of it, you've also got in old school myth, like Loki as he is in Norse myth, Loki's never a bad guy. Like he clowns, but he's not a bad guy. You could even argue that like a lot of cartoon characters whose whole shtick is that they play tricks or practical gags on people are part of this archetype. Like when you're watching like fucking Bugs Bunny cartoons or any Looney Tunes. But they're not exclusively bad guys either. More often than not, they're kind of like a sort of chaotic karmic force for good in a certain way, which is interesting. Like with a lot of classical archetypes, you kind of build in with them sort of like a morality test of like, this archetype's the good one, this archetype's the bad one. That's the whole point of them. But you really don't have that with tricksters. Tricksters can kind of just be on either side of the fence.
Yeah, they're a wonderfully complex thing where they don't have to necessarily be the antagonist. Sometimes they're just the like thing that is encountered along the way, you know? Um, because you'll run into stories like that of the trickster can be your villain. It can be just a obstacle that needs to be overcome, or in some instances the trickster can be there to like help the hero along the way. Like the example that comes to mind is Yoda. When he's introduced, he's
Yeah.
like a mix mash of archetypes. But when you first have Luke meet Yoda in the swamp of Dagobah, he's this wacky, silly, little tricky guy. You know, he's just a goof. And I mean that might fall more into like the archetype of the fool for comedy and stuff. But I think he's trying to teach Luke something and test Luke out on something by being like more like the trickster archetype.
Well, and it's also kind of a fine line between what you mean by the fool and what you mean by the trickster, because these are all categories that are created retroactively, and you can kind of pull from either one of them there. Like, is the Joker a trickster or is he the fool? I mean, it's hard to say. But yeah, no, I see what you mean. Like, part of what's really interesting about this particular thing is specifically with like American comic books, you kind of get into this habit of a character that can break the fourth wall, or a character's whole personality is sort of breaking the black and white morality that an American superhero comic book is founded on. So like American comics have lots of these. In fact, I think if really any major superhero you can name, almost all of them have at least one character that fits this mold, if not more.
Yeah, it's just how popular are they and how often do they come up? Because you know it's fascinating because there's an episode of Dragon Ball GT where they put Goku up against a trickster. You know, like it's kind of a forgotten one, but that's in there, and it is just interesting how this as a trope seems to kind of straddle cultures, where you'll see it just pop up everywhere with these cultures that you know may share some common background or influence, but seem, at least to the modern eye, completely separate from each other. Because the other thing about the like trickster archetype that was kind of in my head that started to tip the balance toward things, and Rumpelstiltskin just kind of threw me over the edge was Jinns, because I was watching fucking Aladdin with Leah, and in the first movie the genie isn't a trickster, but like the problem kind of sort of with the live action remake is they try to make him that in the final moments, and that's just not as good. But then you know when Jafar came back in the sequel, which is not a good movie but has a song that just fucking slaps, Jafar's more of like your like trickster genie kind of thing, because fucking Jason Alexander asks for the legendary sunken treasure of some fucking shit, and Jafar's like, oh, okay, and he just like puts him in the middle of a fucking shipwreck under the ocean. And it's like, oh, do you wish for me to return you back to land? He like shakes his head. Wow, 2 wishes down. Take your time on the third one. Like that just that fucking like I don't know. There's something about that energy that is just so like devious and fun to me. I love that, just the vibe of it. You know.
Well, I mean, speaking of modern phrases, I feel like contemporary internet meme culture means that we're just a lot more receptive to trickster type characters, because we've kind of graduated to a form of humor that kind of borders on gibberish at this point. So anything that is just wacky and random and a vibe is funny inherently now, which means really any kind of trickster archetype is just gonna work. That's just kind of where we're at now. Like we're just kind of at like the weird characters that pop up in multiple memes. They're all just kind of doing the same thing, or even just like any sort of straightforward meme. At the end of the day, always kind of ends in a nonsensical way, and that's why it's funny. It's sort of like we're just in a trickster age.
The era of the trickster.
Literally,
That's it,
though.
y'all. 2020 was all just a big trick.
It all started with the fucking Joker movie making $1 billion, and here we are.
Yeah. So I don't really know where to go with this topic. I don't know what to like talk about with it. I just wanted to talk Tricksters, so I'm not really sure what direction to go in. Do you have an example from like, it could be anything. Like, do you have a favorite like example of a trickster, or just a character that is a trickster that stands out to you?
I mean, it's hard to not just kind of go to the obvious ones that I see the most. Like, I'm always going to want to talk about Batman and Joker's relationship from that sort of more mythic perspective. Because what's really interesting about the Joker, and it's hard to make it make sense now. To be honest, it's been hard to make it make sense for a while, because clowns are just not funny anymore. That's not a thing. There is no human child on the planet that's like, clown, cute. That has not happened in like 50 years. So the original impetus of this dynamic of like, Batman is a scary guy who is really, really serious but is good, versus Joker, who is a really funny guy and is really charming looking but is actually bad. Like, that is a thing that doesn't compute anymore. And so over time, we've evolved that character to be not only just like funny and a clown as his name suggests, but also to just be kind of the exact opposite of order and reason, and kind of lean full tilt in that Dark Knight agent of chaos. One of my favorite modern examples is when Batman and Catwoman are getting married in the Tom King run. There is this like eight page mini that Tom King does, where Joker goes to a guy's house and is waiting for the mail, and he's just fucking terrorizing this dude because he's waiting for his wedding invitation to Batman and Catwoman's wedding. And this guy is like, why are you here? Why would you think the wedding invitation's coming here? And Joker is just like, well, it's got to arrive at some place at some time, and this is some place and some time. It's the funniest thing I've ever read. And it's just that kind of like, the right amount of, this is so fucking funny and this is fucking terrifying, that I think really works about it. But it's also that idea of like, it's not that the Joker doesn't make sense. It's that the dots he connects are so ludicrous that you have no choice but to find them either really funny or really scary. Like, Joker is the kind of character where you could give him the nuclear launch codes, or you could give him a button that would cause like a whoopee cushion to go off. And really, depending on the day, he might press either. We really don't know. And that's part of what's so interesting about contrasting him against someone like Batman, who is just like so insanely methodical. Like, Batman's got a contingency plan for every day, and Joker's just kind of like, I don't know, I'll do this today and like go to the bank and not rob anyone, and then the next day blow up a reactor or something. Like, that's just a personality. So that's always been interesting. And Joker as a character, I feel like, kind of bounces off of basically all other superheroes. Like, Joker versus Superman stories are interesting. Joker versus Wonder Woman is interesting. Joker versus Green Arrow is interesting, because he is just that sort of agent of chaos that's just roaming around causing things to be disrupted. And he doesn't always necessarily have to be the bad guy when he's doing it. Like, there's an ongoing Joker book there was an ongoing Joker book by James Tynion, where he's being chased around the country by James Gordon, and he's not always the bad guy in that. And that's always interesting too, where like, just because he's chaotic doesn't mean that he's always on the wrong side of things. It just sort of means he has his own rhyme and reason for everything that you don't always understand.
Dude, you just know how to do it for me, because I could sit here and talk about fucking Joker all day, right?
I know,
like,
right?
It's just the aspects of Joker that are the most fascinating are the aspects that people somehow seem to miss the most consistently. And this would be like your Scott Snyder situation, right? Where like the creepier and weirder you make him, the more you like do a disservice to the character. And the fact that like Scott Snyder apparently loves the Joker so much but has absolutely no idea how to write him in even like the slightest sense is just something that has like blown me away, that the man's made a career, and like people like go to him and say that like, oh yeah, Scott Snyder's Joker is the best. And like, now have you read literally anything? Like, I've read children's books that do a better job portraying the Joker's character than Scott Snyder. Because you know, the more you run away from those trickstery, clever, silly, kind of laugh your head off moments with the Joker, the less and less interesting character he becomes, the more generic he becomes.
Yeah.
Like you're right. You know, all the clowns in the world, you know, just could collectively sue DC Comics for ruining their image with the Joker. And it's not all him, but it's a good portion.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Somewhere along the line, society evolved enough to realize that white paint, lots of red lipstick, and a big rubber nose are just scary inherently. That's a fight or flight reflex inducer.
Okay, side note. So like, this is so funny. What was I gonna say? I was listening to the Eighth Doctor audios, and they do a whole arc called Ravenous, where you're introduced to the Time Lord's predator, like biological predator, and it's called the Ravenous, and the description is that they have pale white faces, big wide mouths, and reddish blood-filled noses. And they're like, wait, so like clowns? And he's like, yes, well, chlorophobia is actually an inbuilt genetic response to the ravenous in many species. I just fucking love that shit so much.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. But no, like the Joker, I think is in big part responsible for like the degradation of the image of the clown, and then like everything else just kind of runs with it. It's probably Joker and Pennywise are your top two reasons there.
It's true.
Yeah, but like the more you run away from making him genuinely funny and interesting and you know just fascinating to watch, the more you lean into trying to make him into like a serial killer or whatever, the less like interesting he becomes, the more he becomes just like fucking Jojo the Killer Clown or what the fuck ever, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the thing that makes him interesting and compelling is that he is a contrast to something. And I think this sort of speaks to the whole thing about the Trickster myth, too, where it's not a thing that can exist in isolation. You can't have a trickster without, what's the word, like a tricky, someone to be tricked, you know? There has to be something on the other side of it that represents order, that represents a way of seeing the world that people understand, almost like a point of view. And then the trickster thing shows up and disrupts that. And if that becomes too generic, if it becomes too streamlined, like just a regular serial killer or something, then it stops creating that contrast. It stops creating that dynamic. Like at the end of the day, there's really nothing interesting about Batman and Joker sitting on a bench in Batman 51 by Snyder where they're having a conversation, like a rational conversation, because that's not really their relationship. And you can build them to that point, but like it just stops being interesting. It could have been anyone to do that.
Yeah. Now, what do you think it is about the trickster archetype that like lends itself so well to giving them ludicrous amounts of power? And this is kind of leaning into more the magical or whatever kind of tricksters, like your Rumpelstiltskins or your Jins or your Mixelplick and Batmite. What do you think it is about the archetype that lends itself so well to that just limitless ability?
So I'm not a sociologist, but I'm gonna paint you a sociological picture. So
Okay.
if we go back to any kind of early myth, like Greek myth, for example, then there's a way of understanding the trickster, which is an entirely retroactive term. It's not a thing that like exists naturally through time. It's a thing that we go back and look at and form a pattern. But if you go back to like Greek myth, you could construe of an idea of a trickster that would define all of the Greek gods, because all of the Greek gods are petty bitches, and so they are doing really nothing but playing tricks on people. And there's already that sort of inbuilt hierarchy between the gods who are all powerful and the people who aren't. And the early Greek myths and most myths really are always going to be morality tales. They're always going to be either some kind of cosmological explanation for why things are the way they are, or they're going to be some kind of lesson about how you should behave in the face of how things are. And really the only way you can justify that in that context is by having someone with more power demonstrating it to someone with less power. And so I feel like part of what makes the trickster scary or compelling is understanding the world in a way that has a limited ability to change it, and then being faced with something that can just change it at will is kind of what creates that sense of being chaotic in the first place. Q from Star Trek Next Generation.
Yep.
Yeah, I love Q. Q is great. Well, okay, I'll rephrase. I like Q for most of Star Trek TNG, and then I hate Q for basically everything they did with them afterwards. But Q is a really good character.
He was good in Voyager.
Yeah, he was all right. Have you seen Picard?
Good in Voyager. No, I've not seen Picard.
Okay. Don't watch Picard if you like Q.
Okay.
But no, anyway. So Q is a really interesting one. I like Q a lot. I love that actor. I love that character. Like, the thing about Q in that show is that he's an all-powerful, for all intents and purposes, a god, and he just likes fucking messing with Picard. And the reason he gets such a rise out of Picard is because Picard is kind of like Batman. He's like completely straightforward. He's completely logical, but he's also duty bound by the Prime Directive and Starfleet, and so everything in the universe has a proper order, and you don't interfere with that. You don't have the power to interfere with that. You're literally just supposed to be a conscientious observer of everything going on in the universe. And Q should be doing that, and he doesn't, and he has the power to mess with that. And I think that disconnect in power is really as old as storytelling itself, because you're always putting human characters up against things that are more powerful than them, and to give something so much power and give it no sense of rhyme or reason or logic inherently makes it kind of terrifying, because it's one thing to be up against like a really big brute of a monster or a god that you can reason with. It's another to be up against a god where nothing you say is going to make sense to it. And so that kind of fuels the chaoticness. If it was just a crazy person with no power, if it was like an impotent Joker, then it would be far less interesting. It wouldn't really be an agent of chaos. But if it's something that is both chaotic and has the power to enact that chaos on the world, then that's where the mythic side of it comes in.
You know what you just made me think of and remember and be disappointed by all over again every time I think about this story?
What?
Emperor Joker.
Oh my god. Yeah.
It's embarrassing how much better Batman Brave and the Bold did that premise than the goddamn comic it was based on.
Not Star Trek. Batman Brave and the good show in general, so they've done that quite a bit. That comic is almost unreadable.
Oh yeah, no, I'd say completely unreadable. Like literally, it's like written not to be read, because they try to start off doing like the Bizarro thing where it's just constantly backwards talk, and I'm like, no, this isn't interesting or fun. This is just stupid.
It's also in that like weird era of DC where the art is just trash, so I can never tell what the fuck is going on.
No, but like. Bad. No, but I think you're onto something there of just it's kind of that ultimate opportunity to just put the stakes as high as they can possibly be, because there's no way your hero is going to be able to physically overpower this one. and it says something interesting about how often stories, myths, what have you, will just concede to the fact that nothing is going to be as powerful as the human mind. Like, the human mind, self-flattery, right? The human mind cannot imagine something more powerful than itself, because it creates these situations where it gives something ultimate, unlimited power, and then it says, but I could still beat it like this.
Yeah.
And I kind of like it. Like, I was watching a little sketch someone did the other day, and it was like, every man thinks that there's one wild animal that they could easily beat in a one-on-one fight in the wild with just their bare hands. And I'm like, okay, I know it's ridiculous, but he's kind of spitting, though. I think I could.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, like, I could probably take on a fox. I think I could do it.
You just a fox? You gonna limit yourself that low?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I could probably beat up an owl.
Okay, Steve kind of like goes low on the pecking order. This guy's examples are like wolves and anacondas.
Oh no, fuck that. There are definitely forest-dwelling creatures that I think I could beat. There is an upper limit.
Okay. No, I mean, like, I've kind of got that. I'm like, yeah, I could probably take like a coyote, or maybe like a lone wolf. Probably not a pack, but I could probably, because I know how to kill a dog. Not saying it's gonna work out. I'm not gonna give myself a 10 out of 10 encounters on this one, but I got a chance, But like, it's just interesting. It's fascinating that when we think of these characters beating the trickster, right? It's never, oh, well, I gained ultimate power over all of creation and used it against you. It's always like, no, I just outthought your ass, and that's like the ultimate victory all the time,
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up with our whole sort of like overzealous human idea that we're super rational and that's gonna always win out in the end. Because it reminds me, and this has always been the second someone pointed this out to me, I always thought it was the funniest fucking thing ever. But Descartes' meditations, right? So
yeah,
Descartes sits at the fireplace and he starts thinking about like everything that he can conceivably doubt, and then basically tries to go backwards and reconstruct reality from something that he can be 100% sure of. And so if you read the meditation, he opens with like, okay, I can doubt this, I can doubt that, I can doubt this. So I'm going to now get to this point where I can start logically going forward and coming up with what the rest of the world is. And then, for some goddamn reason, he says, and all of this is moot if I'm crazy. But I'm not crazy, so moving on. And there's just this massive moment of like, well, hang on a second. What do you mean, if you're crazy, this is all moot? And what do you mean you're not crazy? Explain that. You have to unpack that. That doesn't make any sense. And that's the same argument where he talks about this idea of like how what if your brain is in a vat and it's all just being controlled by an evil genius? Like he literally comes up with the idea of what if there is a trickster god of some kind creating the world around you and throwing you in a simulation, kind of like the Matrix style. And his way out of that is just to assume, no, that can't be, because I'm rational. And I'm not crazy at all, so none of this could possibly be true. And he doesn't give you a reason for that at all. He just states it like it's a matter of fact.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right. I mean, I think because, in all fairness, at that point you start to like get into just solipsism, right? Where nothing exists, nothing matters, and there's no way to prove it. So therefore, like, there's really, if you just assume that Descartes is crazy, and I mean, going with, I doubt all of existence, maybe he was a little crazy.
Yeah, 100%.
But like, if you're just gonna use that as the argument, it's like, oh well, he's just crazy, then there's really nothing to argue. There's really nothing to say at that point. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe you're right, but if you assume I'm not, and if like, here's me like writing out my thought process so you can tell me if you think I'm being too irrational on this or not. But I have everything there for you. You decide. I don't know. Like, I think you can, at that point, you could say, all right, he might be crazy, but this crazy guy kind of spit, you know?
Well, I mean, it's one thing it's one thing to be like, I could be crazy. It's another to be like, everything I have said is moot if I'm crazy, and by the way, I'm not crazy, with no justification whatsoever. It's a very strange thing to just kind of assume a human being is always rational, and that they're just not crazy, and therefore everything they say follows.
Fair. I can't disagree with you. Like, it is just like, I feel like if you turn that paper in, right, your professor like, wait, what are you going with here? This kind of what? You get like the little note right there, but I don't think it completely undoes everything. It's just funny.
Well, yeah, no, and then that's essentially, just to kind of circle this back around, that's what I thought was interesting, is like there's this assumption that human rationality conquers everything, to the point where we just assume being rational is the counter argument in and of itself. Like, how do you beat Mixie Plick or Batmite? You basically just like get them caught in a riddle that forces them back to their own dimension, right? Like, you are just, Batman's way of beating Batmite is just to come up with some kind of rational puzzle to beat him. And that kind of like supremacy of logic is a weird human characteristic that's been going around for a long time. And that's partly why other trickster characters like the Joker are so compelling, because you can't do that. You can't just like give him a reason and then he'll go away. That's also part of why Q is interesting, because Q's whole first appearance is he's basically asking Picard to like come up with a justification for why humanity should exist. And he basically just ignores every rational reason he gives him. And by the end of it, it's more of like a whim that he lets him go because he likes playing the game.
Yeah, and I mean, Q's a funny situation because you kind of get the they do this with Q. Morrison does it with Mixel Spitlick in the New 52 run, where in the Trickster that had been against him the whole time is revealed to have just been kind of rooting for them all along, right? Yeah. Because in the original finale for Next Generation, you get the whole thing that episode 1 started as humanity is on trial as to whether or not you are worthy of continued existence and expansion into the universe. And then, like, it turns out, surprise, series finale, we're going to conclude the trial. We're going to, the whole series was the fucking trial. I'm like, it's a big brain move, and I fucking love it. Like, the fact that I called it so long into the thing, I'm like, nah, this is good. When I watched through all of TOG, I'm like, this is the trial, man. That's the whole show. And then it was, and I was like, okay, let's go.
It was so cool for like
It was great. The episode's weird, but like, just the fucking plotting of it is fantastic. But like, I think that's interesting when you get the reveal in New 52 that Mixel Spitlick created Superman to be the trick that would trick back to entertain the dimension, the royalty of the fifth dimension. Is just like such a weird fucking concept, but so cool. Of the idea that like Mixel Spitlick is just as much a Superman fan as Batmite is a Batman fan.
Yeah.
He's just doing it in a much less overt way, and he's just pushing him in a different way to give him the best stories and stuff. I think that's just a really cool fucking inversion of the take of like the Trickster's there, and the ultimate trick is making you think they were an antagonist the whole time, right? Like, I think that's just such a cool dynamic to use with the character.
And I mean, to again kind of go back to how most characters fit this, you can make an argument that Satan or Lucifer or the devil is a trickster by sort of the same token. Like, if you go back and you read something like Paradise Lost, and you realize how down on God that book is, and how much in Lucifer's corner John Milton ends up being, and the idea sort of becomes by the end of that book that Lucifer rebels and he goes to hell, but the idea that there needed to be an oppositional force to God in order to appreciate God in the first place is the only way any of that follows is really interesting. Like there's always got to be some kind of like ebb and flow to make that happen. So Misso Splitlick needs Superman as much as Superman needs him. God needs the devil as much as devil needs God. To the point where the Lucifer comic, the Mike Carey comic, that the TV show is based on, ends with God and the devil basically getting merged together and going through the rest of the universe, because that whole series is about how can the devil really rebel if God knows everything. And so to kind of like call his hand at the end, he binds them together. And the idea is if I really have no choice in the matter, then neither do you. So we're just stuck together forever.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a good
I find
series.
it so funny how far, like, what do you say? Oh, you know, the TV show's based on. Yeah, because the devil, like, solves murders in that comic, right?
Yeah, the comic and the TV show are like almost nothing alike. Not even
No, it's just so funny. I like
not
that
even
show.
a little bit.
I like that show quite a bit. I recently rewatched everything that I had watched and then finished it on top of that, and I do like that show a lot. But goddamn it, just the hilarity of based on the hit graphic novel series.
Yeah,
the devil does not solve crimes.
I can tell you right now everything that the show and the comic happen. Lucifer owns a piano bar.
No, they also get hell right. They get Gaiman's take on hell, like dead on.
Well, they get Gaiman's take on hell. They don't get Mike Carey's Lucifer's take on hell.
Wait, what? They change it? That's weird.
The Mike Carey run is a spin-off of Sandman, but it changes a lot as it goes on.
Okay, fair enough. Well, they adapt Gaiman's hell. Also, Gaiman voices God in the original finale of the show.
They also play a My Chemical Romance song, which is pretty fun.
Yeah. They really run out of music to insert with like devil in it.
They blew their budget on the first episode.
Well, no, they like
before permanent.
Yeah, no, they like the whole first season. They every time there's like a song, it's like the devil, and then after like that, they're like, oh man, we got like 5 more seasons. We don't have any more devil songs. Oh, it's good shit. It's good shit. That was the ultimate trick all along. Yeah. I don't know. That's an interesting way to look at that. For the Mike Carey thing. I tried reading that series because I liked the show, and I'm like, it's not the same. Maybe if he solved crimes, I'd like it better.
It's really good. It's definitely one of those things where like you probably want a little bit of distance given like your like of Sandman and liking the Lucifer TV show, but on its own terms, it's very good.
Fair enough. Where does Alan Moore fit in with Lucifer? This is like completely a tangent at this point, but like, what is Alan Moore's connection to the Lucifer comic series?
I don't think he has one, because the series, the Lucifer ongoing, was written by Mike Carey, I think, the entire time.
Okay.
And Sandman's Neil Gaiman's thing, and then Sandman and Lucifer both like have very, very minor brushes with John Constantine, who Alan Moore co-created, but that's it. I don't think there's any connection between those two.
I don't know, it's weird. I just remember when the recent relaunch of all the Gaiman books and stuff, the Gaiman Vertigo universe kind of thing. Recent, it was like 4 years ago now.
Oh yeah, the Sandman universe.
Yeah, where the issue 1 of Lucifer was just a fucking picture of Alan Moore on the cover. It was like Wilson for food. And I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, that I don't know about. I don't know what's going on with that.
Like, what's the fucking connection between Alan Moore and Lucifer? I don't understand. Like, I agree he's the devil, but like, what the fuck does that have to do with Lucifer?
Yeah, I've got no idea what's going on with that. That is really, really strange.
Did he create the idea of the, like, humans want to be in hell thing? Was that from Constantine?
No, because
Okay.
Alan Moore wrote the issues. It's like a 3-issue arc, I think. There's a really mini arc of Swamp Thing where John Constantine shows up, and then John just kind of gets an understanding of the Green, and then he fucks off, and then John gets his own book, and then Hellblazer really doesn't cross over or connect to any of those books really ever again, as far as I'm aware. At least not in the original 300 issues. Since then, probably, because Constantine's folded into the main universe now. But in that original run, like, really nothing. Like, Constantine goes to hell in that series, but the Hellblazer hell is also really different than the Neil Gaiman, Mike Carey version of hell, because that version does the same sort of thing where, like, there are factions and there are different, like, kingdoms in hell. But the main idea there is there are like 3 specific kings of hell, and all of them are in a constant state of war with each other. And the reason John can ever die and go to hell is because the second he arrives in any one of the kingdoms, that kingdom is going to take over.
Interesting. Okay. Sorry, this is like completely unrelated to everything. I don't know. We kind of got there by talking about the idea of the trickster being like on the hero's side the whole time. And I think that's just, again, a really interesting kind of inversion or like doubling down almost on the concept of tricking the audience.
Well, and so that sort of fits what we were saying before about like how the trickster doesn't have to be one side or the other of the moral spectrum. Like, you have your jokers, but equally, you've got characters like Robin Hood, who is also kind of a trickster, who goes around and steals from the rich and gives to the poor and messes with the sheriff and stuff. Or even like the Doctor, right? Like the Doctor, in a certain respect, you could consider a trickster. And that's really interesting too, because if you think about in Reboot era, where the antithesis of the Doctor is the Daleks, and the Daleks are cold, calculating, rational machines, with a very firm idea and grasp on what reality is. And then you've got the Time Lords, but more specifically just the Doctor, whose whole contribution to that is timey-wimey, wobbly stuff, right? Like, there is something there to that dynamic where, like, he is also just kind of dunking on people the entire time. Like, what is the Christmas Carol episode if not the Doctor dunking on a dude for 40 minutes?
No, I mean, absolutely. And, like, a lot of classic Who really does revolve around the idea of the Doctor, you know, conning people into doing what he wants them to do. Kind of the most famous example of this is definitely with the 7th Doctor, who, you know, the situation looks as if Davros has all the power to, you know, fuck shit up, whatever it is. And the Doctor looks at him and he goes, "Davros, please, I'm begging you not to push that button." And he's like, "No, I will push the button and destroy the planet, Doctor." And Davros pushes the button, and then fucking Skaro, the Dalek planet, explodes. And he's like, "Yes, I reversed the polarity. I told him not to push the button." It's like, holy fucking shit.
So bad. Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how that's come around again, because, you know, we've talked about where we don't really like a lot of the Jodie era stuff, and especially the like Rogue Doctor and all that stuff's kind of like not good writing. But like the Rogue Doctor's introduction, they do just basically that thing on a smaller scale, where it's like the Doctor gets their rifle taken away and it's pointed and it's like, "Please don't pull that trigger. I'm begging you not to do that." They pull the trigger, they blow up on the other end like fucking Elmer Fudd. It's like, I told him not to pull the trigger. It's like, you know, it's the kind of that ultimate thing. So that's definitely an aspect of the Doctor that's played with time and again to differing degrees. Of sometimes it's just a quick way to get him out of a situation, and sometimes it's shown as, now this is kind of dangerous and scary level of playing with people's lives. And I like how the character's aware of that too, where I'm pretty sure it's Matt Smith's Doctor has that moment where he's like, "I've tricked people into killing themselves." I might not have pulled the trigger, but I helped them along the way, kind of thing. It's like, that's fascinating.
Well, and it's really funny that he says that right before he regenerates into 12, who literally pulls the trigger and kills people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, fuck it. What's with the pretense, you know?
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, no, and this also sort of gets into, again, trying to figure out that muddy territory between a trickster and a fool. Because, like, where do you draw the line between a trickster-style character who is a foil to someone or something that is more rational and grounded, and that there is, like, a push and pull between those forces, versus someone who's kind of just comic relief?
I think that is the distinction, is the trickster is a fool who advances the plot. The fool is just there to try to break up the action a little bit with a good laugh. Like, there's literally the fool in King Lear.
Yeah.
And, like, his closest contribution to the plot is just making fun of King Lear and pointing out the fuck-ups he's made. Like, that's really all he does in that play, you know? Whereas, you know, to stick with Shakespeare, I'd say a character like Puck is...
from Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah, it's more of in line with the trickster thing, where it looks like he's there just for comic relief. He's got, like, all the funniest scenes, but just as the play goes on, you realize the importance of that character, and that, like, all of his actions are advancing the narrative and driving the other characters along.
Yeah, and I mean, Shakespeare is kind of the king of balancing someone between a fool and a trickster. Because so many of his characters or so many of his side characters really, early on kind of give you the pretense of just sort of being the comic relief. And by the end, they sort of end up being the undoing of someone else. It's really interesting how he's able to sort of toe that line between those two archetypes. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got a lot of characters that fit that same sort of mold of comic relief in modern fiction. Like we were mentioning Looney Tunes earlier. Like Bugs Bunny is a trickster. Early Daffy Duck, before the modern version of it where he's basically Vegeta, is kind of a trickster. It's true, right? It's true.
I'm gonna message the Vegeta voice actor we have for DVDC of like, can you do, of course you realize this means war?
Yeah, no kidding. But no, like early Daffy around with like elements, like he's kind of a trickster. But then you've also got like other characters in that animated sphere who are more just like fools, or more just like the casual comic relief. Like I don't think there's a trickster foil necessarily in something like Tom and Jerry. They're both kind of just equally comic relief for each other. Or like the Pink Panther, or like Sylvester and Tweety. You know, like I don't think either one of those. Well, maybe Tweety. I don't know. See,
I feel like
Tweety's.
Tweety's got that trickster energy, I'd say.
Yeah, maybe Tweety.
Because Tweety's putting Sylvester through the fucking shit, man.
He has murdered that cat so many times.
That cat has infinite lives.
He's a Time Lord.
No. No. He is not anywhere near smart enough to be a Time Lord. There you go. Daffy Duck Vegeta.
Hey.
Oh man, there's not very many good images of this. That might just be the best one, Steve.
That's a good one, though.
Yeah, there might be grand opportunity though to get some fucking like dope fan art made.
It makes so much sense when you say it out loud.
I mean, I just duck season, Kakarot.
Duck season. You need to do the whole rabbit season, duck season bit with your Goku and Vegeta voice actors.
I might have to. I might have to find a way to work that in.
It's so good.
Silly Vegeta. It's right. Like, but the thing is, like, Goku could never be the trickster, right? Because he's too stupid. He would just luck into it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
That's why he's
I
a
guess
fool.
if you say so. Wait, I'm confused. Are you saying it's duck season or rabbit season right now, Vegeta? It's duck season. Fire.
gotta make it happen, man. You have to make it happen.
I'll talk to Albie about it. Anyway, no, it's just it is interesting the way that the trickster character type is so effective when you just go pure comedy with it, because it's always funny. Like you mentioned Q in Star Trek, right? Q's fucking hilarious when just randomly there's a goddamn mariachi band on the deck of the Enterprise and he's just fucking dancing and blowing the horn and shit, right? That is objectively one of the funniest images in that entire series. But it's still a very serious show, very drama heavy, so you can't go like too far with the comedy. But then when you just decide, no, we are making a comedy and we've got trickster-esque characters, holy shit, you can just go balls to the wall with it. Like, you know, you mentioned the Tom and Jerry bit, which doesn't really have it. Like, yeah, Jerry tricks Tom into doing shit, but not to the same degree. He's just trying to survive.
Right.
But like the one that ran with it, right, was that dynamic, but cranked up to 11 with Roadrunner and Coyote.
Oh yeah,
it's the exact same thing, but I would 100% argue that Roadrunner is a trickster in a way that Jerry is just 100% not. Which is funny because of all the Looney Tunes characters, Roadrunner probably has the least like defined personality.
Well, he doesn't have the most defined personality, but to your point earlier about like the way the comedy is structured, Looney Tunes, and particularly Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, had a lot of strict rules for how the action needed to happen. So like Chuck Jones famously had like a list of how Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote's relationship needed to function in order for the comedy to work. So like the Roadrunner could never actually actively harm the Coyote. Everything that happened to him had to be a consequence of using either an Acme product or the fact that he was just an idiot and that he falls to his own doom. And that's kind of why that works, because the Roadrunner keeps antagonizing him by going beep beep, but he's never allowed to do more than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. And I love how it's like survived up until the modern day. Like, you remember those 3D Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner shorts they were doing with the Looney Tunes show?
Yeah, oh my god, I fucking love the Looney Tunes show. I still watch that show on time to time. It's so fucking good.
It is. But like, I love those shorts, and I love the one where he caught him in like this invisible box that he could run into, but then he couldn't get in to eat him. It's just so fucking good. And like he fucking took a selfie with him because he was so excited to catch him, and then he goes to try to eat him and he just fucking can't do it. It's so fucking funny.
That show was fucking brilliant, man. If any show deserved a revival in the streaming area, it was the fucking Looney Tunes show, man.
Mm-hmm. It was probably the best like new thing where it's not just going back to the old formula that they ever did with Looney Tunes.
It's in my opinion the best Looney Tunes thing since these cartoons. Like since the Chuck Jones era started, it's the best Looney Tunes thing.
Yeah, no, I'd tend to agree. Like everything else is, they do fun stuff where they experiment here and there. Like I like Tiny Toons, don't get me wrong. Or liked, I haven't watched it in years, I don't know. Maybe it's like horribly racist or something. I mean, would you be surprised?
Not with Looney Tunes.
Yeah. But I don't know, it's that one was really good. I did like the Looney Tunes show quite a bit. Fucking Speedy Gonzalez had a restaurant.
A fucking pizza restaurant where he just did everything because he was so fast. It's so funny. He's the delivery driver, he's the cook, later he's the maitre d'. It's great.
I like when he was like the sympathetic bartender for a couple episodes too.
Oh
where
god,
they
yeah.
like vented this problem like, no, that's the one job he shouldn't be able to do, but somehow.
And then they made Lola the fucking psycho, clingy girlfriend, and it's just so
great
good.
dynamic. Great dynamic.
Oh,
Best
it's so
characterization they possibly could have given to her.
Oh god, it's such a good fucking show, man.
I agree. I don't know where else to go with the Trickster thing in regards to Looney Tunes. Just the unbridled comic potential of doing it, where you just like, all right, we're gonna do comedy and we're gonna do just X character just can do whatever the fuck they want to the other characters, and all they gotta be able to do is look at the camera and like wink, and it'll just work. And oh my god, it always fucking works. Man.
Yeah, and to kind of like rope it back a little bit too, there's always something interesting. Trickster style characters, whether they're more on the comedic side or more on like the scary Joker side, there's always something interesting about them where they can kind of like prove the message of the story in a way. Like you can always use the Trickster to kind of advance whatever the agenda or the meaning behind the story is. But more often than not, the best use for them, in my opinion, is when you have something that says there is no reasoning with this. Like so many great Joker stories kind of end with that sort of defeatist note of like Batman beat him for now, but on a certain level, Joker also proved his point that that whatever Batman's fighting for is absurd, right? Like that's at the end of the day, that's sort of the Dark Knight of like Harvey was the ace in the hole, and Joker was right, and Batman had to lie in order to preserve the order that he did have. And that kind of like extra touch where like it's not so much that reason wins out, but the Trickster kind of shows up to show you how frail your reasoning of the world is in the first place. It's always interesting.
Mm-hmm. What is an example? I'm sitting here trying to come up with one myself. What is an example where a character was being written in like that Trickster archetype, and it just didn't work? It didn't fit the rules of the universe or the series it appeared in, or what have you.
An example where someone was being written as a Trickster and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. This might be a weird one, and over the years you have become a much more of a drag person than I am, but Goten and Trunks. I think Goten and Trunks are introduced, particularly Goten. I think particularly Goten is from that perspective of we want to have Kid Goku antics alongside stiff and stern and academic Gohan. Back when Toriyama was trying to do the idea of Goku's gone and Gohan's the new main character. And in the anime in particular, I really like a lot of that filler stuff that happens with him in high school. But in that era, Goten is kind of supposed to be the trickstery kind of character where he's just kind of always getting into antics and Gohan's always like having to scam. And I just don't think that ever worked. And I think they very quickly realized it didn't work and then just abandoned it by giving Goten and Trunks a duo to work with each other. And then they only ever show up when they're together. They're almost never separate. And it's not even like we turned him into a thing one, thing two kind of thing. We basically just turned him into this is half of a brain and this is the other half of the brain. And that's why they're always together.
I mean, it's kind of funny to that point, right? Because what do? They end up fusing and then they're like 10 times more interesting.
Exactly. It's like that Fairly Odd Parents. Half of
Yeah. I wouldn't wholly disagree with your point there. And I do think it is... it is interesting. The Buu Saga is where things are the most, like, in flux, and Toriyama's trying to find his footing, and he just decides it's not working, and he kind of goes back to the drawing board. And it's what makes just the opening of that arc such a, weird departure, where all these characters that are introduced in, like, Gohan's high school days have absolutely no bearing on the plot by the time they leave the World Martial Arts Tournament.
Yeah, I mean, the first third of the Buu arc is just like bait and switch after bait and switch.
I mean, that's the thing I like about the Buu arc is it all, like, he kind of, like, goes, well, I bait and switched the whole first third. I guess I'm just going to keep doing it. And, like, and it kind of works. Like, they just try everything. and nothing fucking works. And it, like, I really do love that about that arc. That's legitimately fascinating. It's like, okay, well, we'll give Gohan this huge power up. Oh, well, the boys will use fusion and train, and oh, well, Goku will use Super Saiyan 3. Oh, the Spirit Bomb, fucking man, throwing shit at the wall, hoping shit sticks is kind of cool. It's got a different energy to that fight, to that story where you can't really tell what's coming. But I do think you're right, though, in that it wasn't really working. The dynamic that Toriyama created, it's a fun enough dynamic. It's cute. Like when Gohan's trying to teach Videl and Goten at the same time how to fly, and Goten just like picks it up instantly, and he's like, "Hey, take it a little easy. I'm trying to impress her," kind of thing. You're intimidating her. And he's like, oh, "Why do I have to take it easy? Just because she sucks at this?" Like, that's cute. That's fun. But it doesn't really have a lot of legs, at least not in the way that Toriyama wrote it. It doesn't really have a lot of places that it can go to. Which is unfortunate. At least not in the way that he wanted to write it. I think there is a version where I think that if he had stuck with those versions of the characters, if he hadn't like gone back to Goku, given enough time, that could have developed into something. But the circumstances around when he was writing that, I think he didn't want to take that time.
Yeah, no, I mean there's a point in the training for the tournament bit where Gohan's trying to train and Goten just keeps showing up annoying him, and it's like, look, I found a rock, look, I found a lizard, look, I found a dinosaur, and at that point the way it's written just kind of makes Goten seem more annoying than playful. And then almost immediately Gohan ropes him into helping him train, and then we get the whole he knows how to be a Super Saiyan, yada yada yada. There probably is a version of this story where Toriyama took more time to flesh out that relationship of Goten is a chance to do Kid Trunk or Kid Goku in a more evolved Dragon Ball context, and they just never got a chance to do that. He tried to, well, not him, but whoever wrote Bio Broly tried to do the same thing. But as everyone knows, Bio Broly did not work at all. But that is also probably the closest we ever came to making Goten and Trunks like full-blown tricksters.
That's fair. It's interesting because there's a growing faction that has started to pipe up and say Bio Broly is actually pretty good.
This is exactly like when people started taking up for the prequels. No, you're wrong. Let it go. It was not good. It's okay if it's not good. Stop trying to justify it. Bio Broly, come on now. It's not sacred.
Yeah, fair enough. It's just funny because I know like Alfie actually really likes Bio Broly. I know Fusion likes Bio Broly, and I'm like, I mean, I like that Broly is basically like fucking Jason Voorhees in that movie. That's kind of a cool dynamic. And some of no, that's not even the right one. That's Broly's Second Coming, where he's Jason Voorhees.
Where he's just silently showing around murdering people?
Well, like, he's just, like, got this, like slasher villain vibe to him in Second Coming. I don't know. That's a good point. Because it's kind of there in Second Coming too, with that dynamic. That one was in development before Goku was back, kind of thing.
That's also the one where Trunks pisses on Broly. So yeah, it's also there in Second Coming.
Yeah. So, and I think that they could have went with it more. That dynamic, that character aspect could have worked if you let it run a little bit longer, but I can see, again, I think circumstances dictated that it just wasn't going to work out because Toriyama didn't want to take the time to invest in it at that
which is
point
fair.
His career. Yeah. I don't know, that's a good one, though, where, like, yeah, even the writer kind of admitted that the dynamic just wasn't working, so I think that's a pretty good example. I can't seem to think of another off the top of my head, which is, a shitty thing to do with me asking the question, but I was just like, is there something, though, where it, like, kind of hits like that? I'm like, maybe, but not often. It feels like when you're gonna do the Trickster character, I know a lot of people really don't like Batmite because he got like annoying in the old comics, right? Our friend Manos hates Batmite, like just on principle because of having to read him as he was before he got like any kind of refinement. But I don't know, he's fucking cute. he's this little annoying fucking fifth dimensional imp who stands Batman. It's adorable.
There's also like not even that many Batmite stories, so like I don't know. I never found Batmite annoying. Like I can understand how the joke doesn't work for you, but I don't think we were ever in historically a period where like it's just a Batmite issue every month of Batman or something, you know? Like I think people realize that concept is used sparingly enough to a point.
Yeah. I don't know, I'm still like eternally grateful for James Gunn putting Batmite in the fucking Zack Snyder DC.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so happy that exists. I just wish we could see it on screen. You know how much I'd fucking pay for like a cut of BVS where Batmite just shows up for certain scenes to fucking annoy Batman. Are you sure you should be branding that guy? That doesn't really seem in character for you.
Oh, that's good.
I've got a blue screen. I've got a Batmite costume. I could do it, Steve. Oh. God, that's so fun. Just the fucking, like, car chase scene. You want to go check on those guys? Make sure they're okay?
That's so good.
Oh. Anyway, I think I might be out of things to talk about with this topic. It was a vague, nebulous topic. I mainly just wanted to say, hey, Jafar's cool, guys.
Jafar is cool. I will give you that. Jafar rules.
Dude, fucking none of the Disney, like, quote-unquote villains from the modern movies have any of the fucking, like, presence of the 90s era ones.
Dude, I've been saying for ages, Hunchback of Notre Dame, because the priest in that, his whole thing just being like, I'm gonna sing a song about hellfire because how dare you be attractive and I get horny. It's incredible. It's the greatest thing Disney's ever done.
He is down fucking bad, man.
It's so good. That entire movie being horny and having nothing. It's fantastic.
I agree. No, just man, fucking Jafar like outs Aladdin as the street rat. He's like, Prince Ali. He's fucking like, he just eats it up. He just fucking steals the movie at that. Snake am I? Let me show you how snake-like I can be. It's fucking cool. Jafar is the best, man. I don't give a fuck. Like, part of me was like, maybe I just liked Aladdin because of like, you know, nostalgia or whatever. I'm like,
nah, it's good.
Jafar fucking fucks, man.
Yeah, no. Jafar's voice actor goes fucking. Love that.
Yeah. All right, that's all I got. Fucking Jafar rules.
Jafar doesn't need rules.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. I don't know what we're gonna talk about next time. I don't know who's gonna be here next time. I think Alfie said he wanted to take a couple weeks off just because he's back in America. So who knows what we'll talk about unless you got something off the top of your head you're really dying to review or discuss next week, Steve.
I can give us a preemptive thing. So like if we want time to watch it or get a chance to see if it's watchable, and then if not, we can make accommodations in between instead of waiting. If that helps.
Sure. Fuck it.
Okay. All right. Cool. Let's review Prometheus, the 2012 Ridley Scott Alien prequel movie thing.
Okay. All right. I'm down. I think I might actually have that somewhere.
If you don't, I believe it's on Hulu.
That doesn't help me.
You can just use mine if you need it.
Okay. All right. Everyone, thanks so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am not a trickster.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we'll be discussing things I think the fact that Steve might be a trickster, like, why would he tell us that he's not?
It's reverse psychology.